All right, so I think we're ready to get started. It's 8:15. Again, thanks to everybody, all of you early birds who are joining us for the case for contextualization, why it's important for your students and for you. So a couple of items we want to mention. You can, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. If you want everyone to see them, then make sure you choose participants and presenters, everybody. And this will be recorded. And it will be available if you want to share it with colleagues. We encourage you to have conversations with colleagues about this information. And so also, I think that's it. So I will tell you, let me introduce who we are. Whoops. So I did, well, one other thing I did put in the chat box, again, oh shoot, the link, okay? So, good morning. You can see us in the video, but also your baristas/trainers this morning. I'm Sarah Goldammer, and I am in my picture in full barista garb because I am a volunteer barista in the coffee shop at my church. I've been doing that for 8 years, so I feel very capable that I can reach out to you and make your hot chocolate for you today. If you come to the SIUE campus in Edwardsville, we'll take care of you. Also here is Bevan Gibson. She's got her, now Bevan, if you know Bevan, she doesn't drink hot chocolate or coffee. She has Diet Dew, I can tell you. I want to clarify what's in her cup this morning. So we both have our coffee mugs. Cheers. So let's get started for the case for contextualization. A couple of housekeeping things to begin with. Certificates of completion. I know you all want to get your professional development hours for this, and you will get 1 hour of professional development. And since we're starting off, Bevan and I get to be first for the ICCB Professional Development Network because all day long, hopefully you already know this, there are presentations, and it's not too late to still sign up for some of the additional presentations. So after, about midway through this, you go, my goodness, this is great. I need to spend all day with the PDN. You can still do that. Okay, so for each of the sessions that you complete today, you'll get 1 hour professional development, and you will get a certificate via the email that you registered with. So these are not auto-generated, and they're not created by ELS. They are created by real human beings. So give us up to a week to get those to you. And so that little print at the bottom where it says, please allow it for 1 week, that really should be in glaring big letters, that please allow 1 week. Also, very, very important. Hear me now and believe me later. If it doesn't come, check your spam. Make sure it didn't show up someplace weird before you. But if you can't find it, obviously let us know. Bevan and I will give you our emails at the end. So let us know, because we do want you to get your professional development credit. So that is covered for you. Also, the handouts were sent. So if you didn't get your handouts and you were registered by Wednesday, it probably went to spam also, which is where your certificate's going to go. All right.
So let's do a little bit of professional development advertising before we get started. The Excellence in Adult Ed website, adulted.com, you see on the screen here is the PD portal for Illinois adult educators. And we encourage you to visit this site regularly for important information about adult education and professional development. If you click on the center box right there that the arrow is pointing to, you'll see a link to PD tools. And at the bottom of the page, in the purple notes down there, in the purple wording, it says you want to know more about the latest PD, click here and join the email list. That is how we send out information, and you'll get the most current, up-to-date information possible. So if you click on the PD tools, one of the most valuable tools that you'll find is the PD guide. And it is a professional development guide for you, the adult educators, and it's intended to help teachers to design your professional development throughout the entire year. As you have, we all know you have 12 hours that you need to do, that you're required to do. Some people really go leaps and bounds above. Some people just want to do 12. Whatever you want to do, if you use the PD guide, it contains a targeted list of professional development that is appropriate for different categories of teachers. So if you're an ESL instructor, if you're an ABE instructor, you're an ASE instructor, you want to know information on special learning needs, it's all there. You want to know information on transitions and workforce training, it's all there. The guide will make your life easier. as you try to identify your professional development opportunities that are relevant to what you're doing. So visit the portal website and check out the new PD guide to get all your PD information. And it is updated regularly, so you know it is a living document. The other thing we wanted to point out to you is that if you are interested in learning more about technology, we know that that's a big thing nowadays, and we talk about contextualizing and integrating technology into our classrooms. And a lot of people say, how do I do that? Well, IASA is going to be offering a boot camp, a Google Applied Digital Skills boot camp this year at the conference. And it's going to be on March 13th from 8:30 to 11:30. So you can register for that, to attend that. I will be there. I signed up too, and Sarah did too, because we can all always increase our knowledge. It's over 400 adult educators, tutors, administrators, and workforce development members that attend the conference. And it's an excellent opportunity to meet adult educators and workforce development members throughout the state. And we hope that you will join us. We hope you'll register and actually do that. We don't know that there'll be 400 people in the Google session, but at least there will be at the conference. So without further ado, we're going to get into contextualization.
All right. Thank you, Bevan. Moving on from our housekeeping now. You know, we know according to adult learning theory that we always need to know why. Adults need to know why. So why are we making the case for contextualization? Here are some easy answers. It increases interest. If what we're sharing, if it's meaningful to our students, if it applies to their life, they're going to be more interested. It promotes deep learning, retention of information. And we're going to show you as we go through how this happens. And we're also going to practice. So I'm going to give you a little heads up right now. After I make the case for contextualization and work through some designing of lessons for contextualization, Bevan's going to come back and she's going to work through, okay, what are you going to do with this? How are you going to apply? How are you going to contextualize what you're learning in this hour? So that's coming up. So just a little precursor to that. Provides opportunities for problem solving. We want our students to be able to think critically and problem solve. Integrates new skills and knowledge into an already existing knowledge base. Make those connections, which are so important. And it supports learner-centered instruction. And here's the deal. If you're going to have learner-centered instruction, then you're going to have to know your students. And contextualizing really encourages you to know your students, to know what their goals are, to know what their interests are, to know what floats their boat, so to speak. So let me ask you, does that sound good? Does that sound like something that you want for your students, all the stuff that's on there? So what I'd like to do, because here's the thing, you know, we're at a distance, and Bevan and I, we try to imagine, because we're both very visual people, that we're with you. So what I'd like for you to do this now, and I'm totally serious, do this in your pajamas, Carbondale people with your donuts. I want you to do this. If you want to have all of those things, increased understanding, a deeper learning, problem solving, I want you to stand up right now and say, yes, that is what I want. Beautiful. Thanks for doing that. If you didn't stand up and say yes, then either you need a little more caffeine, so take a sip, or I need to come and talk to you, because we should all want this. So I want you also, as we go through and talk about different examples, and Bevan and I are going to give you like 20 examples, but I want you to really think about, what did I teach yesterday? What am I teaching on Monday? And how could I contextualize? Because we're not saying to throw out what you're already doing. You guys have fabulous lessons. You have them related to the content standards. You have all the wonderful things that you do as good educators. What we want to do is enhance it a bit. So that's what we're talking about doing. So we're going to start out with a poll. So our first question is, are you teaching contextually? Let's see the will of the people, the temperature of the room. So the first answer is, and I'm going to bring the poll up in just a minute, but it's absolutely yes, but I want more information. I think I am, but please don't call on me. Or I don't think so. That's why I chose this session, to learn something new. Or what is contextualization? So you can choose any of those. Let me pull up the poll and then give you just a minute to fill that out. Mr. Rogers. Okay. All right, I'm going to give just another like 15 seconds. So if you haven't filled it out yet, fill out the poll. So I can actually see how many people have voted. So a few more of you need to take a drink of your caffeine and vote. And a couple of you have raised your hands. So if you're doing that as a hallelujah, bless you. If you have a question, please put it in the chat if you don't mind, and we'll try our best to get to that. Okay, I'm going to end it, and I'm going to show the results. So we have a couple people who said absolutely, they love teaching contextually. Yes, the biggest answer is yes, but I want more information. Great, we'll do that. I think I am, but please don't call on me. We will not call on you. And you know what, here's the good news for most of you. You probably are teaching at least somewhat contextually. So we'll talk about what else can we do. I don't think so. And what is contextualization? We had 3 people who said that. I love it. Okay, well, we will answer that question of what is contextualization, so no worries there. Okay, so let's move on and let's remind you, why should you be doing this? Deeper learning, critical thinking, foundation for problem solving, and integrates new skill and knowledge into already existing knowledge base. And one of the things about contextual learning is that you cycle information, you come back to it, and you have a spiraling progression. So that wasn't in there as an accident. We really actually want to put that in. But here we have one more poll for you. This is the last poll. So there will be opportunities to leap to your feet in the future, but your opportunities to poll will just be this. Are you teaching contextually? But we have different answers this time, okay? So let me run through these, and you can check as many as apply when I bring the poll up. Are concepts and examples and student exercise presented in the context of their use? Are new concepts presented in a context of what the student already knows? Do examples and student exercises include many real, believable, problem-solving situations that students can recognize as being important to their current or possible future lives? Do examples and student exercises cultivate an attitude that says, I need to learn this? Okay, those are your choices. And again, you can choose as many as you want. Okay. So here's the new poll. Go ahead and put in. So I see a lot of people checking a lot of boxes. So I think you're probably going, whoa, I am teaching contextually. That's a beautiful thing. Okay, 5 more seconds. It's like those cooking shows, you know, we're gonna count down. All right, sorry, I'm ending polling. So let's share the results. Look at this. This is beautiful. This doesn't surprise me at all because 68% of you said concepts exercise presented in the context of their use. Marvelous. 73% says presented in the content that the student already knows. You're making those connections. Beautiful. And 82% real life, believable problem-solving situations. And then 62% says, I need to learn this. So beautiful. Let's stop showing that. Let's make this go away. Hopefully that went off your screen. So let's launch into talking about a little bit more about the benefits. I'm going to do a definition of contextualized learning and a little more examples. And then we're going to actually talk about designing lessons, making sure we're embedding as much contextualization as possible. And then we're going to do the application part that I mentioned before that Bevan's going to run you through. You get to try it out. So As we've already mentioned, some of the benefits are increases transfer of knowledge and skills. The focus is building critical thinking skills. And the student learns individual concepts and how they fit in the big picture. And I think that's a very important part. So the picture that you see here, somebody's measuring something, right? And it looks like a board. So you probably, if you've taught math, you've taught some measurement. And even if you don't teach math, you teach measurement of some type. You might be measuring how much time you're going to use as you're trying to write, budgeting your time, those kinds of things. And so whenever we talk about measurement and whatever that is, we might then talk about the big picture about what do you measure? What jobs measure? What types of measurement are there? So when we first started talking about contextualized instruction in Illinois, it was in relationship to bridge programs. And so some of you may teach in bridge programs, a lot of you probably don't. So we're making this case for contextualization that all of us need to expose our students to the broad concept of contextualization, which means application, it means problem solving, but then also, even if we're not in a bridge program, the earlier we can expose students to types of occupations, types of skills that are related to certain types of jobs so that they can start thinking about that. I'm thinking none of you decided in a day to do what you're doing today, right? It was over time and over exposure. So we need to make sure that we're sharing with our students as we go along. So elements of contextualized instruction, which brings us to our first handout, REACT. And this comes from CORD, the Center for Occupational Research and Development. So that first handout's there. It looks like this if you want it. You don't have to have it because I'm going to put it up on the screen for you. But if you're the type of person that likes to take notes, here it is. Okay. So R stands for relating, linking the concept to be learned with something the student already knows. Now, we talked about that. And here's the thing. If a student knows something, which they know a lot of things, and you teach them an academic skill, and they may know this from their daily life, they're not going to relate it unless you draw that line from point A to point B. So if you're teaching application or relationships, make sure you draw a very thick, dark line for them. And I'm saying that in their head, not maybe on the board as well, to what you're teaching and how it relates to something else. Think about deeper understanding. Think about retention and what relating does for that. Experiencing, hands-on activities that help students to manipulate, to move things around, to discover how they might actually use this information in a job or in a daily life. Big fan of moving around, big fan of manipulating. And so that happens organically in a bridge program because you're infusing those industry concepts and industry skills, but you can do that in your classroom as well. Make sure that you give the students a chance to experience. Apply their knowledge to real life situations. Again, that relates back to relating and experiencing. If you give them the application and how they're going to use that in life, it's going to make a big difference. Okay. Cooperating. How many of you, and don't raise your hand, just jump up again. Stand up. If you have your students do cooperative activities, do they work in teams? Do they work in groups? Okay, a bunch of you. Yep, and some of you raised your hands. Some of you I know are shouting hallelujah. Yes, I do that. Here's the thing I want to say about cooperating though. It's very important, but you also, remember I said draw that line? Make sure that students understand why they're cooperating, why you want them to cooperate, and you may even need to teach them how to cooperate. So if you want any lesson plans on that, I've got tons of free material. Let me know. And transferring. Take what they've learned and apply it to new situations and contexts. So here's the good news for all of us as educators. Teaching in this way, teaching REACT, teaching Contextualize, is that it actually answers the question, how do I teach in a multi-level classroom? Because if you teach this way, it will apply to a lot of different levels. It also gives you that team approach, that community approach, which is huge. And lastly, it's just a lot more fun. So your students will have more fun and you'll have more fun. So I encourage you to start thinking now is when you have that REACT handout is, do I already do all 5 of these things every time? because we're encouraging you to do it all the time. And how am I doing it? And then the next question is, how could I maybe infuse that or enhance for the future? Okay, so contextualized, I told you a little bit about contextualization, but contextualized curriculum integrates, and here the first two things is probably what you already knew: basic academic skills, industry and occupation knowledge, right? Well, what about that third one? Relevant attitudes and behaviors. That's the one that I don't know that everybody necessarily thinks about. So that's where teams come into place, group work, because that's where you can really talk about the importance of the appropriate culture, the appropriate attitude, the appropriate way that you handle yourself. So for instance, if you're teaching writing and you talk about who your audience is, that'd be a great place to just infuse, you know, if you were writing something to your supervisor, to your boss, how might the voice change as compared to if you were writing to a friend? Okay, so have that conversation about that. If you were writing to your child's teacher, what is the appropriate voice to use as opposed to writing to, you know, your maybe a really good friend, okay, or a spouse or your significant other. So making that connection, again, it's just all of it's interconnected. We're always making more connections. So it connects to relevant contexts and uses real life materials and situations. I just gave you a couple examples of how you could take something that you're doing anyway and infuse contextualization without really changing the lesson at all, just enhancing it a bit. So characteristics of contextualized learning. Let's explore that a little bit more. It's application oriented. We've already said that. It's like, how does it apply? Finding multiple ways. And here's the good news for you also. If you teach your students to think in this way, you don't have to do all that work. Show them how to make those connections, but then they can do the research. You can ask the question, you know, who uses this? What industries use this? Or how could you, and let them do the research and find it for you and come back for you, because then you're also using some other skills that you need, some research skills for your classroom. It's learner-centered. I mentioned that before, and I'm going to mention it several other times, because here's the thing. In order to be learner-centered, we have to know our students. And that's that teaching will just be so much more effective if we know what their goals are, if we know what their experiences are, then we're going to be that much more effective. Abstract ideas are presented in concrete examples to be felt and manipulated. What a difference. So let me give you an example again. Say that you're working on some vocabulary with ESL students. And maybe you're going to talk about how to approach a landlord with an issue in their apartment. Or maybe there are, you know, a whole host of that you can let them tell you, because it's learner-centered, what the issue is. And then you can use that as part of your vocabulary lesson. And what contextualization does is it basically says, you know what, I recognize that you're an adult, and I respect that you have life experiences, and I respect the fact that you're going to have more life experiences, and part of my job is to help you use those past experiences, learn and grow, and prepare for the future. Goals and purpose are explicit. You know, let me go back to my team example before. We're not only doing something, but we're saying, hey, the goal of this activity is for you to learn this, but it's also to make sure that you know how to work cooperatively in groups, because being able to work cooperatively is a work skill, and it's also a life skill, and it's going to help you get along in life. Years ago, long time ago, I did some career development at a small college, and I had students who, I did the resume writing, and I did interviewing, we did mock interviews, I took them on field trips. I thought I'd covered it all, right? And they went out and they were employed. What I found is some of them started coming back. And the reason they came back, none of them came back because they didn't have adequate industry skills. The reason they came back is they had a hard time getting along. And so it's really important that we embed that and that we share for our students why we're doing. And it's personally meaningful. If you link everything that you teach to what your students, what's meaningful to them, what a difference that's going to make. Deep learning, problem solving, retention, right? Okay, so one more example for you, just a real life example, getting a driver's license, okay? So there's kind of two different parts. There's the rules of the road, and there's the application. It's actually driving. And I'm not advocating dogs driving cars, although, yeah, I don't know, that could happen in the future. But this is how long Bevan and I have been talking about contextualization in Illinois. When we first made this slide, I had a 15-year-old, and he had a learner's permit, and he aced the rules of the road test, right? So he got his permit. But at the time I said, you know, here's the thing, even though he knows the information, I would submit that I'm a better driver than he was at the time because I had experience, I had application. I knew about coming to a complete stop. I knew about how to turn into the skid, should I be on an icy road, and all those kinds of things. Now, I will tell you that that example is 10 years old because he's now 25, and he probably has passed me up in his ability to drive because, you know, he has younger reflexes. He can see better at night. Plus, he lives in Boston, so now he drives like a Bostonian. But anyway, that's an example of contextualization. Knowing the information, but being able to apply the information. Okay, collaborative activities. I already asked you about teamwork. I think some of you stood up and said, hallelujah, yes, we do teamwork. So, do you use groups? If you want to stand up again, I encourage you to do it, you know, because you've had a lot of caffeine and you probably need to stand up a little bit. So, and I've got some hand raised. I love those hand raised. Thank you. Hallelujah there. Students are engaged in group tasks that mirror work, home, and community situations. But here's, and I know I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. Make sure you make the connection that of why you're doing what you're doing, and stimulate thinking in your classroom, and give them examples of ways that people collaborate out there in the world. So again, I'm going to just go ahead and fess up that my presenter notes from 10 years ago talk about the Exxon Valdez oil spill and the cleanup effort that went around with it and how they were trying to clean up, and they brought in scientists and just regular folk and that type of thing. So obviously that's past, but there's always something happening that's collaborative. And right now, unfortunately, in the world, we have a crisis called the coronavirus. And so we've got the CDC, we've got the National Institute of Health, we've got all these different organizations coming together, and even different countries trying to work together for to collaborate to solve problems. So that's a way that we can show our students that collaboration happens at all levels. Okay. Okay, now we're moving to that application part for you. So hopefully you've been thinking for a little bit while I've been talking, but you've been listening attentively. How you're going to design contextualized instruction. So that brings us to our next handout. Designing contextualized instruction, which gives you a little bit of characteristics there and also some instruction. So I'm going to go through these, and then it's the work time, so get ready. Design. We want to design for effectiveness. We want to design for transference. Design iteratively. And I'm going to go through each of these. This isn't all I'm going to say about it. Okay. Design for groups. Sarah said that several times. She must really mean it. Design assessments appropriately. And this came from an article called Contextualized Learning, Teaching Made Highly Effective. And I'm not going to say the man's name because you can just read it because I'll probably slaughter it. Okay, so let's unpack that. Effectiveness. What do we mean by that? So it's not just sufficient to share the knowledge. We also need to tell them what's the procedures, what's the processes, and how and when to apply these skills and that knowledge. So let's go back to measurement. We talked about that before. So maybe even broader based, like the example there showed, a measuring tape, right? Inches. But maybe talking about measurement as a general concept. Why is it important to measure? What do we measure? What do we measure in our daily life? How do we measure? What are different units of measurement? So who uses measurement? Cooks, bakers, construction workers, installers, CNC operator, machinists. And so I will mention also is the types of measurement change depending on what kind of measurement you need. And I know when we did, SIPDC oversaw the creation of the Contextualized Curriculum. And if you're not aware of that, I'll talk to you a little bit at the end. But when we did the manufacturing, I became aware of a whole new type of measurement called a micrometer. Didn't know about that before because that wasn't in my world, but CNC operators, machinists use that. Extremely precise measurement. Is that so important when you're adding salt to a particular dish as a cook, maybe not. But just kind of giving them the whole big picture and then how and why would you apply that information. Healthcare also, very different, you know, and again, how important is it to be accurate? When you're cooking, sometimes it's not that important. It's up to you, however you want to season. Whereas, like, you know, for healthcare, if you're administering medication, really important. Okay, so transference. We want to make sure that if you have the conceptual framework, if you understand something conceptually, then you can take it and apply it to other jobs, to other situations, to daily life. So instead of just knowing information, isolated information, we see how it can transfer from one place to another. So hold on to that thought. I'll come back to it when I talk about designing iteratively. So it's broad contextualized learning activities. Big picture stuff, right? Build supporting contextualized learning on basic skills needed to carry out those broad activities. So if you start with immediate focus, so say you have students who you're trying to help them figure out how to get to the doctor's office. Or, you know, it could be something much more higher level. Maybe they're writing a research paper. Whatever it is, we start with broad base information for immediate focus. So maybe we want to talk about organization. So in this world, in the United States, we organize in certain ways. One of the ways that we organize, let me just sit for a minute and let you think about how we organize. Okay, and I'll be quiet. Now try to think about how you organize and how that applies to teaching and learning. So one of the things might be we organize alphabetically. Okay, so if I'm going into a building and I'm trying to find a doctor's office, I'll probably go to the board where they have all the names on it, look for it alphabetically, or maybe I have to do it numerically. Maybe I have to know the floor, or maybe I have to know the specialty. So there's lots of different ways. So alphabetically, numerically, we might organize chronologically. What happened first, second, third? Those are all ways that we organize. So can you see how that would be? Now we're going to talk about alphabetics, vocabulary. We would apply that in that way. But then we also could apply it in research and how we organize information, possibly chronologically, but showing those connections. And that you might be sitting there going, oh, Sarah, my students already know that. Try it out. Try out giving them, like letting them answer those questions of that big picture, broad, and then say, you know, how do you use that in your life? What problems could you solve if you know this skill? And then how can we build on it? Because then we can go very, very complex as well. Okay, so we want to repeat, wash, repeat, rinse, repeat again. Remember I talked about that spiraling progression? If I know broad concepts and then I know how to apply them in multiple ways, that's really going to be helpful. Big picture first. For those of you who like lots of details, that might be irritating to you. Try it. Just try it and see how it goes. And Bevan's going to work with you in just a minute to design. Okay, this is coming up again. Groups. Mimic real world. Individuals learning from each other. I love this. And there's a lot of research that supports that students need to hear different voices and different information. So maybe as a teacher, you've presented some really great concepts, but the student didn't quite get it. But then they're sitting with another student and the student's repeating what they think that your teacher said. Now I'm going to get it because it's a different voice. Okay. So individuals learning from each other. Hallelujah. Love that. That also takes some of the pressure off of you, right? And then the last thing is authentic assessments. Applying knowledge to real world tasks. So let's go back to that organization concept. Okay, so then you might actually ask them to do some organization in their daily life. You might actually ask them to apply to come up with a timeline, to come up with ways that they could organize in a way that would help their life. But they're showing you, or so maybe a measurement. Maybe you actually have them go and do some measurement and figure out how much square footage is in the classroom, how much is in the hall or that L-shaped hall, which is much harder than a square classroom to figure that out. All right, I've talked long enough. Let me turn it over to Bevan.
So now that you guys have learned a little bit more about contextualized instruction, we're going to let you actually try it. Okay, we're going to let you do it. I want you to think of a lesson that you are currently using. It doesn't have to be a standards proficient necessary lesson, but it could be. But think of one first that you are currently using or that you have used with your students. Is there a better reading that you could use to contextualize it? Something that is related to a specific career or a particular interest of your students. As Sarah said, you've got to take some of their previous experiences and go with that. Is there an application or research exercise that you could infuse for greater understanding? Could they do some internet searching to delve more deeply into a particular career or a particular interest of theirs? Is there a more authentic assessment that you could apply? Now, authentic assessment complements traditional assessments like TABE. So we can get, just basic information reading levels from TABE, but authentic assessment is something that actually complements that. It doesn't replace it, but it complements it. Some examples might be, and Sarah gave you a couple, but it might be writing a report about a particular career. It may be conducting research about jobs that are available that are of interest to them, or a topic that's of interest to them, doing some experiments, knowing, maybe having a discussion group amongst your classroom, and as they relate it to the lesson that you are actually teaching. You could use a rubric for assessing that information that they're doing, or you could just do anecdotal assessment, which is actually a really good thing. So why contextualize? Well, you see, we go from here to there, and basically they need a little bit more support to help the students to understand and retain the information that you're doing. And contextualization does that. So as we try it out, contextualization is the meat, so to speak, between where the students are in their information that they have in their prior experience and where you want them and their understanding to be, keeping in mind their prior interest and their prior experience. So I want you to take a minute and see where you could contextualize a lesson that you are currently providing, where you might contextualize it. Now, I know from the previous survey, some of you said you are already contextualizing. So if you are contextualizing, then just type in the chat box something that you're doing that is including in a lesson that may be considered contextualization. If this is new to you and Sarah has given you a lot of information, put down something that you could try in your classroom to contextualize, to actually get your students from point A to point B with using their prior experiences and learning. So I'm going to give you just a minute to type in something in the chat box that you have. Okay, someone uses journals. Background research on topics that we're reading. Great. Role playing. Very good. Research.
Can I just say, hallelujah, I love role playing.
That's right. Research.
Whoops, they're coming in so fast.
We can't read them. Research on the 3 branches of the U.S. government. Very good. That would be great for citizenship courses. Teaching percents using house and car buying. That's wonderful because it's something that they're going to actually need to be able to do. Group writing instead of individual. There you go. That's great. Map reading, using real maps and asking a series of questions. Researching local volunteer opportunities online. Very good. At volunteermatch.org. Another person doing
another role playing.
Comparing prices. Shopping with ads. Very good. You guys it's wonderful things. I've not done this yet, but the idea of different voices came in with this one. Bring in a speaker to discuss importance of metric measurements in HVAC. Very good. That's good. That's great. It ties in the skills that they are needing to do in HVAC with some information that somebody actually coming in that's actually experiencing it, that has applied it.
Can I just add also, I know you're probably already doing this, but I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you, make sure you draw the line. Tell them, why you're doing what you're doing. When you're, be very explicit in the purpose and the application so that they understand.
And someone said dialogues. Great. It's wonderful.
What's this one? I'm sorry, we're going to measuring as a team.
Measuring as a team. Very good. And that also builds team building skills as well. Role plays and interviews with one another. Very good. That's a good practice. Lots of role playing, art and media samples. Very nice. Real documents for health chapter. Very nice. That's actually good. I use cooking and measuring for math. Students set their own goal with the tutor, so we make instruction relevant. Very nice. Based on their goals. You guys are doing great work, and these are great ideas. Yeah. Construction math, instruction for highway construction program. Excellent. Bring in guest speakers. Vocabulary lesson, apply many instances from real life, apply to various disciplines, uses grammar lesson as well. And as you're doing that, you could actually, those words could actually be used you can take those vocabulary words that they're going to experience in those different careers and do that and use those as part of your vocabulary words. Board games, I love games.
She does love games, yes.
Filling out forms in an ESL classroom, that's great for filling out forms because they're going to have to fill out forms for job applications. You may want to include a job application as one of those forms. I don't know that you already don't, Susan, but if you do, then that's relating that to something that they would skill they would need to fill out a form for that. You guys are just typing in like crazy.
Got tons of great ideas. You know what we'll do is we will believe, and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we can capture all this chat and then share that with you as well, just so that you have some additional ideas. We also I mentioned the contextualized curricula, and it is industry related, although there is a career pathways one, which is a lower level one. You can go and take lesson plans from there, whether you're in whether you're in a bridge or not. So if you're just looking for lesson plans, it's on the ICCB website under publications, and I can send that to you. But okay.
Stephen has mentioned research and present career options. That's a wonderful thing. It's combining skills. Number one, it's combining their digital skills with actually doing research. It's finding their career that they might be interested in, and then the presentation of that is something that is a skill that we all need practice in. Maybe not us necessarily, but we do it. We do it for a lot, and the teachers do it in classrooms. But a lot of occupations now, we had one of our staff, her husband was an engineer, and his boss asked him to do a presentation to a group of people, and he freaked out, and he came home to his wife and he said, I need help. I have to do a presentation, and I don't know the first thing about doing a presentation. So we actually have some professional development on doing presentations that we use for our professional pathway, but it may be something that you want to look at in terms of working with your students on doing a presentation and putting one together. So it might be helpful for them in that respect. Group writing.
Can I just mention, Jean, you said personal understanding connection to the Bill of Rights. So, when you get into all of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, it's very interesting conversations. I will tell you, I'm going to relate that back to role playing. I had students after we'd gone through the Bill of Rights, they had to role play different bills of the different 1 through 10 amendments, and the students had to guess which one it was. And so I'll never think of bear arms in the same way. And I don't mean to get into bear arms because that can be a volatile conversation, but they went a whole different way with bear arms. And so, it was fun and students remembered it. And we talk about deeper learning and retention. There you go. Okay.
House budgets, expenses, very good. Rewriting simple paragraphs to include complex sentences and larger words and let the stories go from there. Very nice. Team teaching with the student. I think that's incredible. That's a great idea. It kind of gets them to know what it's like to be up in the front of the room. They're all great ideas. Also include art as much as possible. That's wonderful whenever you think about people learn different ways and what actually one person may be able to do. Now, if you asked me to do art, I would totally freak out. But I would try my best. It might look like a kindergartner did it, but at least I would try my best. Okay.
But Bevan, some of our students have unbelievable skills.
That is true.
And that gives them an opportunity. So let them answer something in an art form. I like also practice introducing each other, eye contact, posture, speaking clearly. So relate that to a job interview. So for anybody who's saying, okay, how's that contextualized? it's pretty easy to contextualize it to what is, and here's the other thing, if you've never shook hands with your students, I encourage you to do that also, practice, because it's not an innate skill. You don't come out of the womb knowing how to shake hands. How do you shake hands correctly? Not, don't squeeze their hand, don't give the limp fish. Those are life skills, but then tell them why you're doing it and tell them that's a great precursor into a conversation about all the things that Susie is doing here with practicing. Okay. So I love Christina. I have my English 3 students read a story drowning in dishes and write a paper about their own personal work experience and relates the story. Now you may have just come up with that self, but I do know that personally that is in the contextualized curricula activities for the career pathways. So hopefully you got it there and you can give a little testimonial that there is some really valuable lesson ideas in there because, and I do recommend that particular reading and activity as well. So thank you, Christina. Okay. Oops.
A lot of you are doing some group work. That's great. Menus from restaurants for math and vocabulary. That's wonderful because they're going to want to go out and eat. They're going to be able to need to order and know how much their bill is going to be as to how much money they have before they actually order. Help with resumes and interviews. Very good. Newspapers for pricing.
Okay.
All right, great. Oh, a jigsaw. Okay. I love jigsaw puzzles.
Yeah, so now you're speaking Bevan's language. It's not art, but jigsaw puzzles. She's all in. So there's tons of great ideas here, you guys. Thank you very much. And then on the next, let me just mention. So.
Okay, now that you have learned more about contextualization and where we want to talk about where we go from here, because as we're trying to go beyond that, we want to move from here and we want to contextualize as much as possible. So we want you to think about how do you see contextualization instruction differing from current adult education classes that you may have in your class that you may be teaching. Do you see any similarities? Think about these things. What will you do in your classroom to begin or to enhance contextualized instruction? And then what questions can we answer if there's anything? And then what help do you need? So as a reminder, as Sarah said just a minute ago, your program has access and you have access to already created contextualized curriculum that is in the areas of manufacturing, transportation, distribution, and logistics, and healthcare. We also have a career pathway curriculum. And if you're not familiar with these, one of the ideas that Sarah just said about the dishes, that activity came from the career pathways. And so curriculum, if you're not familiar with these already, you may want to start by looking through these to give you some ideas on some great lesson ideas that are already contextualized to careers. So if you're a person that came in today and said, I don't know anything about contextualization, and so we gave you the information today, but we're also going to give you these tools that you can use to look through to say, hey, I could do this in my classroom. I'm already teaching this topic, but I could put this in with it to make it more relevant and to help contextualize it for my students. There, you can use that. There's a handout that you were given that is next steps. And so this is what you need to look at. And if you already printed out the handout, that's great and you have it to look at. Otherwise, the next steps handout is something for you to use to think these questions through. Teaching contextually in adult education classroom. What do you already have in place? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to see what you're doing and how you can tweak it to contextualize it. What will I do to promote contextualized instruction? What resources do I have to help me teach contextually? We have the curriculum. Who can assist me in efforts to teach contextually? It may be that someone said that they use their students to come up and actually co-teach with their students, team teach with their students. It may be that we just need to have conversations with our students, as Sarah said earlier, developing those relationships with your students. Find out what their interests are, what their goals are, what their previous experiences are, and then from there, go about contextualizing what you're teaching and the topics that you're covering. Lastly, we want to remind you that the PDN is on Facebook and Instagram. I don't know if you all are aware of that or not, but we are. And we want you to share it with your adult ed friends, and we would like for you to follow us on social media. If you would like to do so, you can like us on Facebook, you can follow us on Instagram, and I think that I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Well, let's see if we have any questions. And if you put one in earlier, and unfortunately, you guys, and I apologize for this, whenever we click on our PowerPoint, the chat goes away. So I have to keep bringing it back. So if you put a question before and we didn't see it, I apologize. I love Jose, respond to an email. Yes, very important. So put it in and okay, where can we find those contextualization tools for contextualized instruction? Miley, is that something that you possibly could pull up and share the link? Because I will tell you, but on there's a link on the PD portal. Remember at the beginning, Bevan showed you about the Excellence in Adult Ed website. So there's one there to all the contextualized curricula. There's 4 of them. There's also on the ICCB website. Okay, we'll answer that in just a minute, Cheryl. On the ICCB website under Adult Ed Publications, that's where they are. There's all kinds of great resources under publications, so you really should click that and star it as well. So that's where you can get the contextualization actual lesson plans and curriculum that's there that you can use. But you know what, Bevan and I really want you to think broader based than that. It's like, what do you already have and how can you contextualize that? Mm-hmm. So you kind of have all those resources, but what we really want you to do is take what you're doing and enhance it. Because we know you got a lot of good stuff you're already doing. You're familiar with that. So don't throw that baby out with the bathwater. Keep the baby in the bathwater and just put some more bubbles in. So, okay. Yes. So if you attended and you were here, you will get a certificate. Okay. So, and thank you. Miley is just put in and Miley Senioroti is in our office here at SIPDC, and a huge shout out to her because she's a wonderful team member. We love having her. And she just put in the link that will take you to the publications and reports where you can get the contextualized curriculum. And yes, so everybody who's been on will get a certificate. Remember, number 1, allow up to a week. Number 2, check your spam because it might be there, especially if you never received the handouts email from me on Wednesday evening, then that probably went to your spam also. And so, but if you don't get your certificate in a week, do follow up. And the way that you can follow up is you can let Bevan and me know about it. And there's our contact information. If there's anything we mentioned and you want more information, I said something about teaching people how to be effective team members. The state of North Carolina has a 505-page lesson plan manual that's free that you can bring up. I can send you that link also. There's all kinds of resources that you can use. So feel free to reach out to Bevan or to me, and we'll be happy to help you. And know that just by signing up, you don't have to have another sign-in sheet. By being here, by logging in, we have a record that you're here.
We want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you found this session helpful and that it has increased your knowledge and will have an impact on your classroom and therefore your students. We appreciate all of your willingness to share, and good luck with the contextualization, and let us know if you need any other help. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, go to more sessions. Enjoy the whole day. Right. Carbondale people, lick you your fingers from eating those donuts, and maybe put on some real clothes and your pajamas and join the rest of them. Thank you. Go.